There is no way for me to make these words easy for you to swallow. The story I'm about to tell you is not backed up with physical evidence. Neither is it easy to understand. I'm an older man now, and my memory is becoming less reliable with age. But I feel if I don't put this story down into words now, it will forever fade into the darkness of my memories. I've had a privileged life, and in my later years I became a university professor. I was lucky enough to have a job teaching literature, in particular the silver poets of the 16th century. I say this only so you know I'm an educated man, and although my story borders on the fantastic and the macabre, it comes from a mind that has studied, and a mind that understands the value of evidence. I will not blame you if you dismiss my words as the ramblings of a madman, or the dreams of a dying mind. I only ask that you consider my words, for it is a story I feel that I must tell. When I was a younger man in my late 20s, I was very politically active, as many of my generation were. I feel very proud to have been part of a generation of young people who really tried to change things. I was part of various protest groups. I organized rallies and free stores, food drives and marches. Anything to get our message of peace out into the media. It was a time when we lived in the shadow of the arms race, the Cold War, and nuclear weapons. We all believed that at any moment, it could all be over. The news came to a group of like-minded students I was working with that an airbase in Suffolk was being used for the storage of arms and possibly nuclear weapons. I was asked to organize a group and stage a protest at that facility. The plans involved small boats as the base sat at the edge of a large lake. The idea was to protest on the water with large banners and loudspeakers strung out across a line of boats. A number of us would arrive in the dead of night. Then along a secluded stretch on the edge of the lake, we would launch the boats and begin our protest. The events that took place that night would forever change the way that I would look at our world. The night was calm. There was a little cloud cover and scatterings of rain, but the stars could still be seen in their vast numbers in the beautiful British countryside sky. We had to take extra care not to be seen as we reached the side of the lake, as there was still a partial full moon visible, and it made the night quite bright. From the lake edge we could see a number of guard towers on the other side of the water. The towers stood tall, silhouetted in the night sky, each topped by a manned searchlight. At intervals, the searchlights would sweep across the shimmering moonlit water, which in the calm of the night looked quite beautiful. As the hours counted down to first light, we waited patiently, hiding in the tree line at the edge of the lake. At around 1:15 a.m., a brilliant white light appeared and began to glide across the lake's surface. We thought it was a large searchlight at first. Then the light began to get brighter and brighter until it scorched the whole night sky with a dazzling bright white light. We all hid in fear and panic of discovery, as we were sure it was some kind of aircraft like a helicopter from the facility. But then we realized there was no sound of engines or rotors turning. The night was completely silent. I arose from my hiding place and walked out to the edge of the water. The light stung my eyes, it was so brilliant. I lifted a hand to my brow to protect my eyes. The light pulsated, then instantly shot upwards into the stars and was gone. We stared silently at one another for a moment, before instinctively looking back up towards the heavens. As quick as the light had disappeared, it was back again, right on top of us. For a moment, it seemed as though time was standing still as the light hung there above us in the sky. The light began to dim, and I looked up into the center of it. I saw a pulsating amber light, and for a second I saw what looked like a domed egg shape in the middle of it. Without warning, the object began to slowly rise again. Then, with immediate speed, the light split into 3 separate glowing triangles and drew back above us in the night sky. Then, in what seemed like an almost threatening maneuver, the triangles drew together, 1, 2, 3 behind each other, to form the shape of an arrowhead that pointed straight towards us. I began to move backwards away from the objects when I was suddenly blinded by a light. As my eyes adjusted, I saw the figures of many armed men emerging from the tree line. I looked out across the water towards the facility, and at an amazing speed, I saw military boats hurtling towards the center of the lake to meet the objects. As I was watching all of this commotion and amazement, a soldier came up behind me and hit me in the back of the knees with his rifle butt. I fell to the floor, and the soldier placed his gun at my head. "What the hell are you guys doing here? This is a restricted area." The soldier spoke in an angry, yet quiet voice. I was afraid, but I was able to muster up a response to his question. "What's going on here? This is amazing. Is that aircraft one of yours?" Just as I spoke, there was a red lightning flash which filled the sky. The soldier raised his rifle, and I lifted my head. The object at the front of the triangles was now a glowing, fiery red. There was a low, almost inaudible pulse sound, and the tree line behind us burst into flame. Soldiers ran from the tree line, their bodies on fire from the burst. The soldier behind me picked me up by my shirt collar and pushed me towards the lake, away from the fire. I saw 2, maybe 3 or 4 of my fellow protesters screaming in pain as they ran from the tree line with their bodies ablaze. The soldier shouted at me in a plea. "Swim for it! Get to one of the boats out there!" The heat from the fire was so intense, I immediately did what the soldier said, and I ran straight for the lake. I reached the water and turned to see the soldier raising his rifle towards the objects in the sky. There was another blinding red flash, and when it cleared, the soldier had vanished. I looked around in a panic. Apart from the quickly spreading intense blaze in the trees, I was completely alone. The sound of the fire crackled, and as I looked out at the lake, in the distance I could see the barrels of guns blazing as they fired from the military boats up into the sky at the objects. The heat was growing too intense from the fire. I saw a few boats from the facility that were now drifting close by. I decided to take the soldier's advice and swim for it. Red lightning now constantly lit up the night sky. I saw a fireball mushroom up into the air as a military boat exploded. The lake was now the color of fire, as flaming debris floated on its surface from the wreckage. I paddled frantically and finally made it out to one of the boats. I was exhausted, and a frightened soldier put his hand out to me in the water. Before I even had time to thank him for pulling me aboard, the most horrifying experience of my life occurred. The soldier's eyes looked behind me, and he screamed. There were 2 other men aboard that small boat. I looked upon them as they gazed up at the sky in silence with terrified eyes. I slowly turned to see one of the red glowing objects right along beside the boat now. The sheer size of the object filled the expanse of my vision. I could now see the surface of the object. It was a shimmering, liquid-like material, which had the appearance I can only describe as a thick oil slick. It hovered above the water, and the red light reflected on the surface. It appeared to warp and contort as I looked straight into it, giving the appearance of a constantly moving oil slick. The lightning struck again, and the soldier beside me was dragged away and began to melt inside of the shimmering craft, as if an invisible force had grabbed him by the chest and violently pulled him into it. I reached out to try and grab him. I managed to grip his hand, but the force was too strong, and he disappeared screaming into the object. In absolute fear, I turned and cowered in the corner of the small cabin of the boat. The object now moved above us, and the other 2 soldiers were torn away from the boat screaming. Their terrified faces lit up in the red lightning as they were obliterated into the object's surface. I closed my eyes and waited for my turn. One more time I heard the low pulse sound of the object, and then nothing. I opened my eyes to the calm night air. The objects were gone. There were no more screams, no more gunfire, just the gentle sound of the lake lapping up on the side of the boat. In the distance, I could still see the lake shore. It was still ablaze from the first blast. A military boat drifted by us silently on the lake. Once again, I was alone. The dawn slowly began to break after what seemed like an eternity, and I made my way to the shoreline. I could see a lot of commotion on the other side of the water at the facility. Helicopters and other craft took to the morning sky, and boats began to fill the lake. I made the decision to run, and not stick around to try and explain to anyone what I had seen. I never spoke of that night to anyone. Over the next few weeks, I distanced myself from those I had been affiliated with in organizing the protest. I waited for news of at least something about the incident from the media, but there was nothing. The only story I ever saw that was ever released about the whole frightening experience was that there was a story of a few protesters who were harmed by the military in a violent event that occurred outside of a heavily guarded airbase in Suffolk. I made no waves about it and kept myself to myself after that. The rest of my life has been spent in wonder of what occurred that night. I would like to think that the craft I saw were not of this world. But with today's technological advances, and after Eisenhower's warning about the power of the military-industrial complex, who knows? Maybe it could have been one of ours.